Washington, CNN. On Friday morning, just hours before his office helped certify that Joe Biden won the state's 16 electoral votes, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger was insistent he still supported Donald Trump and wished the president were heading to a second term. "I wish he would have won, and especially in Georgia," said Raffensperger in an interview with CNN's Amara Walker on Friday. "I certainly cast my vote for him, but the results are what the results are." In stating the simple truth that Biden won Georgia, even if the margin was by a slim 12,000 votes, Raffensperger has opened himself up to the wrath of his own party, turning this self-proclaimed conservative, Christian Republican into a pariah inside the Georgia GOP. Both the state's Republican U.S. senators have called for Raffensperger's resignation. The Republican governor publicly pressured him to investigate groundless charges of a fraudulent election. South Carolina Sen. Lindsey Graham called Raffensperger directly to discuss how absentee ballots might be thrown out, though Graham has said he was merely asking about signature verification. Raffensperger's wife has even received death threats over text message. The worst of the pressure has come from the president. Georgia Secretary of State, a so-called Republican, Rhino, won't let the people checking the ballots see the signatures for fraud. Why? Trump tweeted on November 13. "Without this, the whole process is very unfair and close to meaningless. Everyone knows that we won the state. Even with the presidential race certified, the pressure is not off the GOP Secretary of State." The January 5 runoff elections for both of the state's U.S. Senate seats will determine which party controls the Senate, meaning all eyes in the world of politics will remain on Georgia until then. Though Raffensperger's refusal to humor Trump's dubious demands has won him plaudits from many around the country, it's had the opposite effect among Republicans in Georgia, some of whom say the soft-spoken 65-year-old who once harbored ambitions to run for governor has written his own political obituary. If you can find someone who's 18 years old and has a pulse who says they support Donald Trump, he's going to beat Brad in the primary in 2022, said one former Republican elected official and longtime activist in Georgia. "I don't see how he can survive politically." One GOP operative who spoke to CNN wondered if Raffensperger, a successful businessman who spent an unprecedented $3 million of his own money on his 2018 race, will even run for re-election in 2 years. Despite it all, Raffensperger has kept his chin up and insisted that his obligations to the public require him to speak uncomfortable truths to his fellow Republicans. "I've been a supporter of President Trump, an early supporter both in our financial resources and also vocal in 2016. And then also in 2020, Raffensperger told CNN Friday. "But at the end of the day, our office is to make sure the election is run fair and accurately. And it's what we've done." Friendly fire from Republicans. Trump tells a very different story. To him, the election in Georgia was fraudulent, plagued by missing votes and questionable counts. None of his claims has stood up to scrutiny. But that hasn't stopped Trump from demanding that Republicans, who control nearly all the levers of power in Georgia, get tough and stop Democrats from stealing the election there. Among the states where the Trump campaign is contesting the results, Georgia is the only one where the top elections official, Raffensperger, is a Republican. That's brought about an unusual amount of friendly fire. On November 9, Georgia's Republican U.S. Sens. David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler called for Raffensperger to resign over unspecific charges of failures and questions about the integrity of the election. Gov. Brian Kemp, a Republican who had previously served as Secretary of State, stopped short of calling for his successor's resignation. But he did echo the calls from Perdue, Loeffler and Trump to investigate potential fraud. Raffensperger shot back publicly, defending the conduct of the election and saying he would not be leaving his job. He did, however, acquiesce to a hand recount 2 days later. On November 11, to Eric Tannenblatt, a veteran GOP operative in Atlanta who is close to Loeffler. Given the amount of pressure that was building on him, Raffensperger almost had no choice but to buckle to some of the early demands. I will say at the time that happened, the temperature was pretty high, said Tannenblatt. There were a lot of people in the state, Republicans, Trump supporters, who believed there were real problems. Both Perdue and Loeffler are in the runoff elections in January, and Republicans in Georgia are hypersensitive to maintaining the loyalty of Trump and reaping the political benefits of his voter base. A fall guy for the GOP. The intense focus on Raffensperger comes at a precarious time for Georgia Republicans, though the party dominates control at the state level, holding every single statewide office and majorities in both houses of the General Assembly. Biden's win there carries with it a hint of danger to the Georgia GOP. It was the first time in nearly 3 decades that a Democratic presidential candidate has won Georgia, and comes as Republicans' margins of victory there have been shrinking over the past few cycles. Now that Republican control of the U.S. Senate hangs on the outcome of the 2 runoff elections in January, the spotlight on the Republican Party in Georgia is white hot. So perhaps it's not a surprise embattled Republicans would turn on their own. The GOP wants a fall guy for Georgia, and Raffensperger will be it, said Eric Erickson, a talk radio host on Atlanta's WSB station and longtime conservative activist. Tannenblatt, the GOP operative in Atlanta, said Raffensperger is a victim of the national attention he has drawn since the election. When you're a Secretary of State in a state and all of a sudden you become a nationally known figure in a squabble with the President of the United States, that doesn't put you in a positive light, Tannenblatt said. Raffensperger went into the 2020 election with high expectations but also some baggage during his first 2 years in office. During the June primary elections, Democratic and liberal activists blamed him for long lines and faulty machines, particularly in majority-minority counties and precincts. Some Republicans, on the other hand, were bothered that Raffensperger had for the first time allowed counties to use drop boxes for absentee ballots during the primary. The June primary was very messy on Election Day. Very long lines. People were very upset, said the former GOP elected official. People are very upset at the thought of putting your vote in a drop box. People feel like that's not secure. In the days after the primaries, Raffensperger suggested the problems were with a few county election officials, not in the Secretary of State's office. Raffensperger's moves on mail-in ballots have also drawn the ire of many state Republicans. In March, his office mailed out nearly 7 million absentee ballot applications to registered voters unsolicited, catching many of the state's Republican leaders off guard. His decision to alter the signature matching rules for absentee ballots also became fodder for Republicans, including Trump, who say he made it easier for mail-in ballots to be accepted and that could help Democrats. As Raffensperger tried to administer an election in the middle of the pandemic, anticipating more mail-in absentee ballots than ever before, his actions did not inspire confidence among many state Republicans. According to the former Georgia GOP official, the former official told CNN Raffensperger failed to communicate effectively. You're in an environment where people are on edge, the former official said. There's this large number of mail-in ballots, and now it's on the strength of those ballots that Biden wins. Raffensperger has continued to defend his performance and remains committed to the idea that the election was conducted fairly and offered a warning to those who charged otherwise without evidence. I think that we really need to be mindful about what we say to people. That we don't really need to spin people up, he told CNN Friday. We just have not found anything that was system-wide, systemic, that rose to the level that would actually overturn the results we have today. That Vice President Biden has carried the state of Georgia